He came back from Europe. This was between the years 1945 to 1948 when Ben Gurion made that effort. Of all the 23 officers that they interviewed, they were making a plea on behalf of the Jewish community in Palestine to come and help organize the military force, teach us how to fight. You know, it's also time to remind you that one of the great teachers was a Scotsman by the name of Lord Charles Wingate, who came and taught us the secrets of night warfare between the years 1936 to 1939. Of all the 23 officers, only one answered the call positively. David Mickey Marcus. So when we're talking about the hidden forces, the hidden powers of our people, it's the conviction that he had. It's what he saw in Europe. It's what he wrote to his wife, which I'll share with you in a second, that made him simply do the right thing. How many New Yorkers know that the first major general in the Israel Defense Forces, the first Aluf, was a New Yorker? How many people know that? Very few. And it's our job to make sure that every New Yorker knows that the first major general in the Israel Defense Forces was a New Yorker. And this is one tiny example of the impact of the story of David Mickey Marcus. This is not only the story of the entire heroism of his generation, but it really what inspires my generation. I can tell you this as someone who spent many years serving his country in the diplomatic front as well as the military front. Our generation need that inspiration that stems from this story. When you look at Mickey Marcus's biography, I think it's pretty obvious that he was not a Zionist in the ordinary sense of the word. What do I mean by that? He was probably not familiar with all the nuances, with all the arguments, with all the divisions of the various factions within the Zionist movement. He was more of a spiritual Zionist. He understood the spirit of the movement, and when he answered Ben Gurion's call, that was the motivation. His understanding that only an independent Jewish state with a strong military, well-organized, well-trained, can prevent the unilateral extinction of the Jewish people. Because make no mistake, the motivation was to totally annihilate the Jewish people from the face of this earth. And the creation of the State of Israel was the number one step, a necessary step, to make sure that the possibility of unilaterally destroy the Jewish people will no longer exist. Mickey Marcus simply wanted to do the right thing. And we admire his decision to do the right thing, for which he paid with the ultimate price, his own life. Simply because for him there was no other choice. There was no other alternative. While serving with distinction in the U.S. Army during the Second World War, he witnessed the consequences of uncontrolled hatred and evil, and understood that the State of Israel is the only long-lasting guarantee for a secured Jewish state. With his own eyes, he had seen the beaten, starved prisoners in the Nazi concentration camps on the day of liberation. To his wife Emma, he then wrote, "These are people whom nobody wants. They have no friends, no allies, and it breaks my heart. Will there ever be an end to their sorrow?" That's what he wrote his wife. 3 years later, in 1948, Mickey Marcus became a volunteer of Machal an extraordinary group of people who joined the IDF during wartime. Some of them are here with us, of course. To Mickey Marcus and his friends in Machal, Israel was not just a concept, but a necessity. Among them, we chose to highlight this year the critical role played by women, not only among the brave members of Machal, but throughout the entire history of organized military Zionist force. Throughout its 64 years, the IDF has benefited from wide participation of women in both times of peace and war, thus accumulating rich and unique experience in women integration. As you well know, during Israel's War of Independence in 1948, women were in full combat status and assumed important combat command positions. In fact, during pre-state days, women formed about 15% of the armed movements that opposed the British. After the war, they were no longer allowed into combat positions, yet they continued as trainers and provided a valuable source of training human resource. From the late 1990s onward, women moved back into combat positions, including flight school. The first female fighter pilot graduated in 2001. So Ruth, Dr. Ruth, what you started back in 1948, today we have a female fighter pilot. In the years before women were reabsorbed into combat units, there used to be a women's corps which provided professional support that was created as a parallel administrative system to the command system. The Women's Corps was disbanded in 2001. Today, in its place, there is a female consultant to the military.